Welcome to the Alchemy of Sex and Spirit, where sex, psychology and spirit meet. This episode is an introduction to our new season in this podcast, Quantum Sex. Oh, and stay until the end for this week's magical practice. It might just change everything. Almost as soon as I was born, I began looking for God. From an early age, I was looking to find him or her or it. I knew it existed. After all, I'd just arrived on this planet from an existence that's at least one dimension closer to the source of everything, blissful. London, planet Earth, wasn't so blissful. My parents were hard-working and dirt poor. My first conscious memory was the bedroom I shared with my brother, in which I was also born. It was cold and damp. My family were good people. My dad served in the army for the whole 6-year period of the Second World War. He was away in France and Germany, with only occasional 48-hour periods of leave. Still, he managed to marry my mum on one of those trips home. They also managed to conceive my brother. He was born in the middle of the war, in 1943. I followed in 1946, a so-called baby boomer. In the 79 years since then, in my quest to discover where God hangs out, I've had the privilege to have had many spiritual experiences, some of which were so significant that the ongoing course of my life changed as a result. And I'm going to share some of them with you in this episode because it will give you some context to understand where quantum sex came from. Now, as I said earlier, I was born into this world knowing that God exists. I'd spent who knows how long in a world beyond this one, where there's no concept of a godless existence. So as soon as I found myself in a physical body, the most obvious thing to do was to find that presence here. From my youngest age, I enjoyed listening to the music that the Salvation Army played on street corners. I went to a Church of England school and endured church parade every week, but the God I knew wasn't there. My parents weren't at all spiritual or religious. They had far too much to worry about and to deal with just surviving day to day. They thought I was strange, but they never discouraged me in my search for God. By the way, I'm conscious that by referring to God, I'm using the G word, that for many people have very negative connotations and for perfectly understandable reasons. That's why I prefer to use the source of all to describe the state of consciousness that I'm describing. I'll use that term from now on. And for the myriad spiritual beings that inhabit the worlds beyond this physical world, I'll use the term the unseen. I like those titles. I hope you feel more comfortable with them too. When I was about 14, I had my first genuine spiritual experience. My parents had moved out of London to Luton. I didn't want to leave my friends and everything that was familiar to me in London, but we moved nevertheless. In those days, it was still comparatively safe for youngsters to go out alone. And I used to get the train into London at least once a week to see my old friends. On one of these trips, we were having an adventure exploring London's West End. Suddenly, I felt an overwhelming sense that I was close to the source, the presence that I'd been looking for all my life. I mumbled some excuse to my friends to split from them, and I found myself walking up the steps leading to St. Martin in the Fields, a big old church that stands there overseeing Trafalgar Square. I nervously opened the heavy doors leading into the church, an empty, giant, sacred space. The whole church was empty except for me, a young scallywag of a boy. I sat in one of the hard wooden pews. There was silence. Time passed. I don't know how long. And then, there it was. The presence that I'd been looking for. A light, brilliance and warmth combined, not in a solid form or a person, a presence, a light. Not a light like that of an electric light, but a luminosity of a different quality. It rotated and sparkled. It filled the whole space of the church that was in my vision. I felt a combination of deep shame and yet amazing acceptance. I've no recollection of how long the presence stayed with me, except that in one sense it stayed with me for my entire life since that day, 60-odd years ago. Not constantly, of course, but at specific times in my life, the light has returned. I've since understood this being of light as my holy guardian angel. In magic and the mysteries, this presence is referred to as your HGA. Of course, in reality, it's within me constantly, but manifests subjectively on special occasions. Now, there isn't time in this episode to describe the return of this light in 1970, when Jane and I needed to find a church to get married in, or the time when the light appeared in the night and instructed me to take my family and become part of a spiritual community in Sussex. But an appearance in 1983 is part of the thread that has ultimately led me to quantum sex. So it's important to include it in this introductory episode. But first, some essential background. 5 years earlier, in 1978, shortly following my father's death and my son's birth, Jane and I started out on what was to be the defining period of our life together. We sold our house and left our hometown, families, work, and everything that we'd grown up regarding as security, and moved into a spiritual community with several other families and several single men and women. The strength and common bond of the community soon attracted the neediest people in society looking for help. Drug addicts, alcoholics, outsiders, street people, some recently discharged from prison. Fast forward to 1983. I was in Rottingdean, just outside Brighton on the south coast in the UK. I was alone and at a point in my life when we were needing to find a house to rent. It was difficult because as a member of a spiritual community, I had no actual salary or credit record to show to a letting agent. I needed some magic. Suddenly, in the middle of a busy street in the town centre, the light appeared in front of me. It was like a giant energy form. No face, but otherwise roughly in the shape of a human. I recognized it as my HGA. My legs buckled under me. I fell to my knees. I was helpless on the pavement, face down. After a few moments or seconds, I don't really know how long, I looked up at the giant light form that was in front of me. It was holding out its hands to me. And there in the palms of its hands were gifts. Everything I would ever need. Houses, cars, prosperity. take them. I was invited to take whatever I wanted out of the hands of my guardian angel. Here, take whatever you need. I couldn't. My hands just wouldn't reach forward and take what was being offered by this light. Now, it would take many episodes to share the details of my life journey following that day on the pavement in Rottingdean, and doing that wouldn't help you particularly and wouldn't directly serve the purpose of this episode. But suffice to say, the intensity of the work in the community and my own mistakes took their toll on us. And working without any financial support other than charitable donations, we became poorer than those we'd been trying to help, and probably just as needy. Emotionally and spiritually, I'd come to the end of my personal resources. I was broken. Disillusioned, we moved back to our hometown and fell upon the love and support of family and friends. For the next 7 years, we tried to live a normal life, concentrating on simply being a family in the real world, beyond the spiritual community where we'd lived for the past 7 years. Jane and I needed to get to know each other again without the constant activity of the community work going on around us. Looking back, those few years were so precious. We had fun together, just as a family for the first time for years. We were also able to reconnect properly with our aging parents who were now entering another stage of their lives, and with friends who we'd left behind when we entered community life 7 years earlier. Yet it was hard to communicate to anybody how we really felt deep down. We were carrying an inner call, a destiny, but at that time, I had no idea where it would lead us. It was against this backdrop, one day in late 1991, that the telephone rang. It was Dennis, my old mentor from those early days in corporate life. He explained to me that he was engaged with a group of eminent medical doctors and business entrepreneurs to help in the setting up of a medical clinic in the USA, specializing in treating men who suffered from impotence. Now, in 1991, there were few treatment options available for sexual problems. In those days, individual men, women, or couples simply suffered in silence. But a startling discovery occurred in the late 1980s by a surgeon who was conducting a heart operation. After injecting the smooth muscle around the patient's heart with the hormone prostaglandin, the surgeon observed that his patient, who was under general anesthetic, had a hard erection. This discovery was subsequently developed into penile injection therapy, a so-called medical breakthrough treatment for male impotence. It became the forerunner to an eventual rush for other similar clinics to open around the world. It also provided the impulse that 10 years later produced Viagra. Now, I knew very little in detail about the trip to the States that I was being asked to take, nor about the task I was being asked to perform, except for the fact that I was to recruit and train counsellors for an impotency clinic that had recently been opened in the States. There were two main reasons why I agreed to take this trip. One was my respect for Dennis. If he was prepared to meet and brief me about the impotency clinic project, then I was prepared to trust him. The other factor that greatly influenced our decision to embark on this vague and somewhat flaky-sounding adventure was that we were flat broke. My 6-week trip to the States lasted 3 years. I recruited the necessary counsellors and trained them in the procedure of self-injecting, explaining the potential side effects, and most importantly, how to involve the patient's wife or partner. On my return to the UK in 1994, I went on to create and establish a sexual therapy centre that became known as the School of Intimacy, Consciousness and Self-Awareness, or ICASA. That's now helped hundreds of men and couples to overcome sexual anxieties and dysfunctions. In 2000, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she died in 2006. And so, we arrive at 2012. I was in London. When least expected, the light appeared and stopped me in my tracks. Quantum sex, it said. What? Quantum sex. Quantum sex. You will research it personally, discover it, write about it, speak about it, and teach it. Get ready. And then the presence left. All the energy within me was drained away. My body was trembling from head to toe. I couldn't think, talk, or reason. Eventually, I regained sufficient awareness to get myself back home from London and put myself to bed. But the words of the light were racing through my head. Quantum sex. You will research, discover, write, speak, and teach it. Get ready. The physical trembling lasted for several days. The research, discovery, and understanding has so far lasted 13 years. During that time, with love and encouragement from my beautiful wife, Alba Lucia, and with reassurance from the holy guardian angel, I am now ready. And more importantly, you are ready. It's said when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's equally true that when the teacher is ready, the student appears. Hence this new season, Quantum Sex. I can finally say that I now know how to accept the gifts from the holy guardian angel's hands, how to receive from the wellspring of light that's endless, fathomless, and much, much more importantly, I've come to the stage in my life's journey when I'm able to help you to take those gifts that you need from the hands of your holy guardian angel in a far shorter space of time than it took me. Stay around and follow this upcoming series. All episodes will explain a facet of quantum sex. It might indeed change everything. Magical practice. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Have a sheet of plain paper and a pencil or pen within reach of your chair. Now, switch off your phone and take 15 minutes to sit and be still. Set a timer to tell you when the 15 minutes are up. We'll start with the square breathing rhythm that we practiced at the end of our last episode. So, breathing through the nose, inhale for 4 counts, hold your breath for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, hold your breath for 4 counts. After a few rounds or 2 or 3 minutes of this square breathing, let your breath do what's natural and unforced. Now, open your eyes and draw a straight line on your otherwise plain paper. Measure its length with a ruler and then move it at a distance equal to its length and draw the outline of a square. Spend a moment or two meditating on the image of the square. Now, close your eyes and quieten your mind. Breathe rhythmically but naturally until the body is still and the mind quiet. Let each breath settle you deeper into inner stillness. Now, mentally, see your square. Now, formulate a cube. Meditate on this figure as a symbol of the universe, a map of the cosmos. The cube has 6 faces, 8 corner points, and 12 edges. Contemplate the symbolism involved in this cube of space. If you find it possible at this stage, mentally enter the cube and view the universe from that perspective. Look around from within the cube. When your timer sounds, take a minute or two to return to the 3-dimensional world, and then to your physical body. When you've become properly aware of your legs and feet, simply get on with your day. If you found this episode helpful and interesting, please subscribe to this podcast or my YouTube channel, and look out for next week's episode where we'll begin to answer the question everyone is asking: what is quantum sex? And until next time, take these words from A Course in Miracles away with you. You're not weak, but strong. You're not helpless, but all-powerful. You're not limited, but unlimited. You're not doubtful, but certain. You're not an illusion, but a reality. Thank you for listening. I'm David Brown, and this is the Alchemy of Sex and Spirit.